How do you see the global change in energy moving forward? Do you think the market is evolving to something a little different than maybe we're used to?
I do. Globally, Canada's position in the global energy delivery. But if you look at all of the mayhem that's happened in the last 4 or 5 years, you can only look at the moves that Germany has made, if you're familiar with that. I mean, talk about making the worst decisions for your economy and for your country with respect to their choices of energy. I mean, they still, even in absolute crisis, they still mothballed their 3 last nuclear power plants to put themselves into a, while the house is on fire.
All right, Des, thank you so much for joining us here today on Mine Stock Talk. And we've been wanting to talk to you for quite a while because your business is very interesting. And as you know, we typically speak with mining companies from an investor's perspective. But you're not a mining company, but you service mining companies in the oil and gas industry as well. And so we'd love it if you could give us a brief overview of what Enterprise is, a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get right into the nitty-gritties after that.
Certainly. Well, thanks for having us. I can tell you that this year is our Enterprise's 20th year in business. You know, if we go back, 𝗙𝗡𝗧𝗘𝗥𝗣𝗥𝗑𝗦, Chairman and CEO of the company. I'm President and Director. We founded the company back in 2004 and went public in 2005. We quickly graduated to the TSX in 2007. So we've got quite a history. You know, if you go onto SEDAR Plus these days, you'll see that history all recorded there. In the history of the business, we've been a bit of a serial acquirer. We've done 9 acquisitions in that history. We've done some amalgamations, and we've done some very timely and opportune dispositions over that 20 years. Currently have 4 business units, and it's best to describe what these 4 business units do. We supply the site infrastructure to the project sites for our clients, and generally speaking, our clients are the oil and gas producers. So project sites like drilling, completions, and fracking, we do a lot of starting to do more and more support for the water transfer programs and so forth. And we also supply site infrastructure when they're building their gathering system plants out in the remote areas inside their producing fields. We obviously support those with the site infrastructure. So question might be, well, what is site infrastructure? Well, there's a few anchors to that in our fleet. One of the anchors are the mobile power systems that we supply for those short-term project sites. What I mean by short-term, they're several weeks to several months in length, these particular programs or projects. So we bring mobile power systems to site that all of the power needs of the site infrastructure that we also bring out, which is the mobile structures. So the offices, the command centers, the medic buildings, those kind of things, even bathrooms. We even bring out communication towers. These are very remote areas, so they need connectivity. Then, of course, lighting is a big deal in the site infrastructure package. You know, as you know, much of the activity in our sector is in Canada, and much of it in the north. So for, you know, good half of the calendar, there's more darkness than there is sunlight. So these are 5 to 15 acre sites, generally speaking. So lighting there's many light towers on site, and some of them classifies, you know, stadium light towers go up 65 feet and get a broad amount of light on the project site. And then there's other ancillary site infrastructure that we also supply. So as you can see, it allows the client to be operating 24/7 on these sites, all the way from, you know, minus 40 degrees C to, you know, plus 40 degrees C. So not only does everything have to be mobile, it has to be robust and can mechanically have good uptime. You know, where we're providing a real leadership at Enterprise is not only are we a multi-location, full-service site infrastructure shop. We've been leading the way, transitioning away from diesel to utilizing natural gas in our mobile power systems. And we have this first mover advantage. There's no one in our sector that is providing natural gas-fired microturbines. And if I can describe that, normally these areas these project sites would have multiple diesel-powered units on site. Every light tower that I described, you might need 6 to a dozen light towers per site. Well, there's a little diesel-fired generator, a 6 to 20 kilowatt diesel-fired generator at the base of every tower. So that's a number of those out there. And of course, you're going to need 100 or 150 kilowatt diesel units to power the buildings and the communication towers, other ancillary power needs that the client has. So there's many, many diesel generators on site traditionally, and they consume thousands of liters of diesel. So what we've been doing over the past 5 years is retooling our power fleet to bring on one large natural gas fired unit. In most cases, we're building our fleet around the microturbine technology. So there was one unit, and then we have a microgrid of cabling and distribution panels that are set out around the exterior of the project site, and all of the infrastructure plugs in seamlessly. So there's a couple of things that is an advantage for the client. The majority of our clients are gas and gas liquids producers. There's an opportunity to use the client's own natural gas that they're producing on site or nearby. So that eliminates them cutting an expense check for diesel fuel to be brought out daily. And you're talking thousands of liters, $1.60, $1.70 a liter times thousands of liters. And you can stroke that off, that expense, by utilizing the client's own natural gas. It's a real big cost advantage. But further than that, when we transition from diesel to natural gas, we have massive emissions reductions. And those are not 20 and 30% reductions. They're in these harmful emissions, it's 85 to 99% reductions. So very valuable to the client.
Now, when a client comes in for a project and you guys do a deal together, is there a carbon credit advantage for them to work with you?
Yes, it is. When you see, especially with our tier 1 clients, and what I mean by that is, the larger names that we work for, the big producers. We have, and I believe the legislation has now been intact for about 3 years, and it's kind of nicknamed the Heavy Emitter Act. So if you're an industrial company, you don't have to be just an energy producer, but any industrial company that is producing 10 kilotons or greater of CO2 equivalent is caught in this legislation, and they're obligated to not only track their emissions across the scope of their activities, but they need to report those emissions. And there are thresholds for those emissions. If they're over, there's financial penalties. If they can bring them under those thresholds, there's carbon credits that can be earned, which show up obviously on their balance sheet. So just like our ever-loved carbon taxes that we pay as consumers, every year or two they go up, right? Just like this legislation, these thresholds will come down. Okay, so right now, the CNRLs and the Tourmalines, the big producers, Suncor and so forth, they're all in that category of greater than 10 kilotons of CO2. So they're caught in this legislation. But as the threshold starts to compress, the mid-cap players will be involved, and eventually, junior-sized players will be involved in this legislation.
In the case of, say, a mining company or some very remote camp, we'll call it, can the product be shipped to them? The natural gas itself?
And it's interesting, we're talking with you today is we're starting to introduce ourselves, and we're getting introduced to some mining leaders. We've had a few conversations here in the last couple of months. Systems are not being used in the mining sector, and it absolutely is a hand-to-glove opportunity for the mining sector. There are two ways, and obviously on these remote sites, they're utilizing diesel just like any industry does, but there's opportunities to bring on compressed natural gas. If there's no production nearby to be able to take advantage of, compressed natural gas at industrial vessel levels can be brought onto site. In fact, there's a Canadian company called 𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗘𝗥 that is in the business of mobile compressed natural gas. They were bought, I think, a year ago by Superior Propane. Obviously, Superior Propane sees an opportunity in the compressed natural gas. There's opportunities for this purpose alone. We can get natural gas mobile power systems to site, and there is an active compressed natural gas economy out there to service that as well. So the mining industry is ripe fruit for enterprise. And as I said, we've been introduced to a couple of CEOs, and they're very interested in the in this sort of innovative mobile power system.
Anything that involves ESG, because investors like ourselves are concerned that they at least address it and look at ways to do carbon capture or reduce their carbon emissions. So over the past, say, 24 months, how's it been financially at the company? I think you guys have done fairly good.
We've seen some ups and downs in the energy sector. It's cyclical, to say the least. But we did come out of some very, very high activity times. 2011, 12, 13, and then 14 were very, very heady times. But we hit a downturn in the energy sector. And it all started when, if you remember back in 2014, we had, I believe, August of 14, we had $140 WTI. And then, of course, Saudi Arabia stepped on the gas pedal and started overproducing. They were trying to teach the Permian shale revolution a bit of a lesson. But what it did is it cratered oil prices. It was 140 in August of 14, and by January of 15, it was under 40. So that created a tremendous downturn that we didn't see a pickup until Q3 of 21, so only 3 years ago. So it was a 7-year downturn that decimated our services industry. We lost half of our energy services companies in Canada. Of course, that equipment and that manpower, the equipment gets sold at auction. It's all over North America and the world. It's not here in Western Canada. The employees are gone. So then we get an uptick in 2021. All our clients are increasing their CapEx spend to develop their assets, and that gets us more active. Well, there's half the equipment, half the expertise, and we're back on. And of course, enterprise with these very in-demand equipment offerings, our ability to not only get 20 and 30% revenue increases year on year over this pickup period, we're growing our margins. I mean, we're if you look at our presentation deck on our website, it's gross margins in the high 40s. Sometimes we're clocking in over 50% in a quarter. With EBITDAs, 40 to 45% EBITDAs. So for an equipment-based company, those are really, really desirable profitability metrics. And the best of the energy services equipment players that are reporting issuers are more in the mid 20s, with the general pack is in between 15 and 19% EBITDA. So we're really generating really good cash flow and profitability with these in-demand equipment offerings and services that we have.
How do you see the next, say, 24 months? And what do you think of the price of oil, say, over the next couple of years?
We're in a better energy economy here in Canada. I think we've got two very, very serious catalysts that change the lumpiness that we've seen over the years. We had May 1st, the TMX oil line was put into commission. You got to remember that both oil and natural gas, for the history of Canada, we've only had one customer, and it's been the U.S. So we've had pricing issues and differentials that have been affecting the price that Canadian producers are getting. But we're now months away from LNG Canada. Canada's first LNG project, and it's Canada's largest industrial project of any size. It's well over 40 billion, and it comes into it'll be shipping early next year. Now, Canada's involvement in the LNG global LNG market is huge. It's an absolute needle mover for Canada's natural gas producers, and of course, it's a needle mover for us services that are supporting those producers in the field. So, with this TMX line getting oil to Asian markets, which is new for us, LNG getting to these Asian markets, and it's important to note LNG Canada is the head operator is Shell Canada, but the three partners are Petronas and Korean Gas and Mitsubishi. So these are prominent Asian partners in this program. Now, there's three other LNG projects here on the West Coast that are at various stages of permitting and construction that are right behind it. There's the Cedar project, which is headlined by the lead operator is the 𝗙liche First Nations. And there's another First Nations project right behind that. And of course, wood fiber. which is a privately owned, the billionaire that owns, name escapes me, it'll come to me, but they have a Canadian producing entity, and Pacific Cambrian is the producer, owned by him. And of course, this is his, I believe, second LNG project. Woodfibre has an LNG shipping facility, liquefaction shipping facility in Western Australia. So Canada is at the early stages of involving themselves in the global LNG marketplace. And I think it's just going to be absolutely phenomenal, not only for the producers and the service companies, but Canadians all the way around. There's a couple of unique benefits to these Canadian West Coast operations. Is if you look at the leaders in liquefaction, you've got the U.S. Gulf Coast, you've got Qatar, and you've got Western Australia. All of those deal with high ambient temperatures. I mean, Qatar, 55 degrees C in the middle of summer. West coast of Australia, obviously half the year in the Gulf of Texas, it's hot. So they're refrigerating or liquefying natural gas, which takes serious refrigeration horsepower, and the cost of that energy to liquefy the gas is what it is in those ambient temperatures. On our West Coast, Prince Rupert, Kitimat, in the winter, it's just barely over zero, type thing, and in the summer it barely gets over 20 degrees. So it's a perfectly desirable ambient climate to be for cost concerns to be producing LNG in that climate. Very stable, depending on seasonality, it's fairly stable. There's not a wide variety of temperature changes. And then, of course, BC is, blessed with, I believe, 90+% of electricity power is generated by hydro. So there's very, very good cost advantages to Canadian LNG that we have against some of these other regions in the world.
And also it's located really well for shipping, isn't it?
That's the second point I was going to make, is that, you mentioned Europe. Well, that's a long way around the planet, but I'm not going to say, Europe won't see any West Coast Canadian LNG. They might very well will. The Asian market is very close shipping for the Canadian West Coast, closer than West Australia and the Gulf of Texas there. Obviously, they got to get through the Panama Canal. So we have an advantage on shipping distances to the Asian market for sure.
Can you also give our listeners an idea of what kind of clients Enterprise has? We
have a varied client list. We are rich with tier one players. CNRL is Canada's largest energy oil and gas producer. They're a client of ours. Tourmaline, Canada's largest natural gas producer, is a client of ours. Petronas, so for some of the foreign players, Petronas, Pacific Cambrian, Shell, ARC Resources, the list goes on. ConocoPhillips, Murphy, so we have many clients that we're working for every day in the field. All the way down to mid and smaller type players as well. If
we could explain to some of the viewers the Evolution Power projects, it's a company, correct? A subsidiary?
We have 4 business units. Evolution Power is one of them. And that's the company that has developed this expertise. When I describe the sort of traditional way of diesel-fired generators on these mobile sites, it's a very mechanical arrangement, right? Diesel-fired power plants and so forth. And of course, now that we're developing one large-scale 480-volt system in a singular, up to 0.5 megawatt style unit, and some, these microturbines that we are building our fleet around, they're scalable. We can daisy chain or link together by sync cabling several of these. We were on a project with a tier one client. They were doing a massive water transfer project, and they were running these 400 horsepower pumps. So they needed 1.2 megawatts of power. So we linked 4 of our 333 kilowatt microturbines together to act as one power plant to handle that kind of horsepower. So very scalable. We can link these together in parallel to develop whatever power need the client has. As well, these are very advanced systems. All of our field techs and our expertise, we have connectivity to these in the very remote field, so we can see the performance of these power plants on a screen, on a dashboard. You know, we can see gas quality coming in, gas pressures. We can see the performance of the turbine itself. So, and microturbines are extremely reliable, all the way down to -40, the units that we have, and 99.5% uptime. Not only very reliable, but our connectivity to our units in performance in the field. If anything's going sideways, we'll know about it before the site will know about it, so we can get a field tech out there and deal with whatever issue we have to deal with. But very advanced systems we have in our fleet.
Where do they get built, manufactured?
It's a U.S. manufacturer. In the world of microturbines, there's barely 4 manufacturers of microturbines. We are dealing with the manufacturer of the gold standard. Their unit is extremely reliable. It's bulletproof. We've made it mobile, that unit. Usually turbines are installed permanently onto a site, and they have a life of sometimes 20, 25 years. So a very long life asset. We are in a mobile short-term arrangement at these project sites. Our projects are several weeks to several months in length. So we need to be mobile and, of course, be able to pick up and mobilize that unit to the next site or back to the yard for what have you. So, this is something that we've built our innovation expertise around, of making these things mobile for our purposes. And of course, they have terrific fuel tolerance. Some of the other microturbines that we have tried out and what have you, they've got some shortcomings. They don't perform well, past about minus 18 C, and they have to have perfect fuel. Well, when we're utilizing fuel of the clients out in the field, we're not always assured of perfect fuel. So these units have terrific fuel tolerance, so they can take a bit of wet gas or some H2S or what have you, some content of that, and still operate. So we're building our fleet around this, and we have a very, very good relationship with that builder. They're a global player. The energy sector knows this unit very well, and because many of our clients purchase these units for installation in their gathering system plants, so they know it well, and now they get to see it come to their locations in a mobile setting.
How safe are they?
480 volt systems, so they're not tiny voltage, but all of our microgrids we build. That's the cabling and the distribution panels that are utilized on site. That's all built in-house by our teams. They're built by master electricians and journeyman people, and built well past code. So we're utilizing very, very thick gauge DLO cabling. Everything's a twist lock, so very safe. But nevertheless, safety is a big deal in our energy sector. I don't know an industry that takes safety more seriously than our energy sector. It's an industry inside of an industry. So there's very, very high bar to what happens on our sites out in the remote area. We meet all of that. Like I said, we've been a player in our industry for Enterprises in its 20th year, but some of our business units that we've acquired over the years, Hart and Westar are 2 business units of ours, and Arctic Therm have been in business, 25, 35 years. So there's reputational value to these businesses, and we've made it through all the thicks and thins. And I think that's where the value is in investing in enterprise going forward, is sustainability and good management and profitability.
And that would explain why the stock's done well since we started buying it. We've been involved for a bit over a year now, and we're pretty happy with the way the stock's performing and the sound of what the next few years look like. But I was also reading somewhere or heard that you had done some kind of a deal with a First Nations group.
Getting aligned properly with the First Nations is definitely a priority. Many of the First Nations are involved in the energy sector. Many of them work and have services businesses and so forth. But a few years back, there was a BC Supreme Court decision. Blueberry Band First Nations were taking the resource sector and the BC government, the provincial government, to task. And they got a favorable decision by the Supreme Court. It triggered an 18-month moratorium on drilling permits for the oil and gas sector in northeastern BC until an agreement developed. And that took a year and a half. And it was finally agreed upon back in January of 2023. And then drilling permits and activity started to happen again. But there was a moratorium. So if you were a production company and you didn't have an inventory of drilling permits to work off of during that 18-month period, it was pretty lonely for some of those that didn't. For the first time, I was told, and I need to verify this, but I was told that northeastern BC's natural gas production declined for the first time in over a decade because of that sort of moratorium on activity. But anyway, it all got sorted out. And it's in legislation that these industries have to have a certain percentage of First Nations involvement in the development and the services of the industry. We have some very, very desirable equipment offerings. We were able to have an arrangement with a leading First Nations development company. As you can see, when there's quota, the producers have to utilize a certain percentage of First Nations involved businesses. It makes sense to align ourselves. Of course, it was very good of them seeking us out to bring out this arrangement. It helps us, it helps them, fostering more of our innovation and making low emission product offerings available to a bigger client base. So it helps us with our landing more client, and we get the energy of the First Nations group and all of their advocacy of how to steward this development forward in a more manageable and economically and environmentally. So that agreement was with a First Nations group out of northeastern BC, who are very active in the energy and resource sector.
And so how do you see the global change in energy moving forward? Do you think the market is evolving to something a little different than maybe we're used to?
Yeah, I do. Globally, Canada's position in the global energy delivery. But if you look at all of the mayhem that's happened in the last 4 or 5 years, you can only look at the moves that Germany has made, if you're familiar with that. I mean, talk about making the worst decisions for your economy and for your country with respect to their choices of energy. I mean, they still, even in absolute crisis, they still mothballed their 3 last nuclear power plants to put themselves into while the house is on fire. And we're at a point where hydrocarbons are going to be a part of our life for as long as your eyes can see. We need to do things better. I mean, if you look at the emissions profile that we have on our deck that shows just going from diesel to natural gas and the emissions profile, the reductions are massive. Think of just moving from coal for electricity production to natural gas, because coal is a more dense emission emitter than diesel. Even if we selected better energy, we can actually move the needle on emissions dramatically, right? And I think we're learning that wind and solar are an answer for almost nothing. They're intermittent. These windmill assets and these solar panels are not lasting the 15, 20 years that they've been advertised as. So they don't even operate long enough to get your payback. This is where we have to realize that natural gas in the world and nuclear have a way better path to decarbonization than some of these intermittent renewable opportunities, which are, to be honest with you, failing.
Well, that's another reason why we'd like to see the mining industry do a little more work towards product like you have and use natural gas. Obviously, reduction of diesel is critical to the whole thing. So the company's done really well. Do you see any acquisitions going forward or consolidation? How are you going to run the company?
We are on a feverish pace here because of customer demand. It's driving our our CapEx spend. For 2023, we entered that year with about a $6 million CapEx budget. It ended up being 15 million in the end. And that's because of just customer demand. We earmarked 10 million in CapEx spend for this year, 2024. We're in the end of August and we're into it for 9 million. So it's going to exceed that 10 million. We're on a nice, lift because of our equipment offerings and our expertise. Going forward, I really believe that enterprise, I mean, we're still a small cap or even micro cap company. I think we're going to be a very attractive acquisition target for a larger energy services business that don't have any of our equipment offerings or service offerings. I think our growth of revenues and our margin of profitability is something that's going to become attractive. So I that's where I think somebody's going to come sniffing around and knocking on our door. It wouldn't surprise me. Nothing happening yet, but I just think we're on a very, very good path that will soon be recognized.
Well, I'm excited to follow along with the enterprise story, and I love that your company is very forward thinking and it's really about the future. So for me, that's a huge takeaway, and I appreciate that you're able to share all that information with us today.
Incredibly interesting, Des. And so thank you very much. Good luck with the company. We're happy to hear that maybe there's a buyer out in the weeds somewhere at a higher price. We're happy to hear things like that, but we know the company's doing great.
Yeah, thank you. Important to note that, management and directors, we own 35% of the company. So, we are managing the company because, in the manner because we're direct owners of the business. So we're running it like it's our own. Probably not unheard of, but it's probably infrequent to see management teams have, 35 or 40% of a publicly traded company. But that is the case with us, and we're interested in growing our position beyond that.
Calling all savvy investors in mining and resources. Seeking the inside track on Enterprise Group? Look no further than 𝗙𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Our cutting-edge search tool is designed to reveal hidden gems and provides real-time stock updates. Visit for the insights and stay for the gains. Seize the opportunity and explore the magic at 𝗙𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Uncover new investment possibilities today. Don't forget to hit the bell below to subscribe and then like and share this video. Let's get the word out there.